for 8 hours. Okay, and we're going to go to there and present. Thank you. But it would have been nice if we'd gone all the way to the beginning. Okay. Oh, nope, back. Okay. Life cycles. Tonight's class is going to be about the cycle of life. I'm not talking about, animal cycle of life, but the way that Judaism marks different moments in life. We're not going to hit the one that gets the most questions, which is death, because death, end of life questions, funeral questions, mourning questions, there's a lot more detail there. So that's going to be saved for a future class. So we're going to take care of the pre-death life cycles, if you will. Got it? Good. Which means we're going to start with birth. Some of you are closer to that topic than others. But birth is a big deal in Judaism. All the way back in the book of Genesis, in the first chapter, we get what is often described as the first commandment, the first mitzvah, which is to be fruitful and multiply. And that's kind of required in order to continue us as a people, to continue us as humans. And we consider kids to be a great thing. Judaism is very much pro-kid and pro-create. Sorry. Ignore the jokes. Judaism does think that children are a blessing. And when a child is born, it is a cause of celebration and a welcome for the child. And we welcome both boys and girls into the community of Israel, into the Jewish group. And there are some things that are the same, whether you're welcoming a boy or a girl. There is a process of giving a name. There is a giving of blessings. And there are some things that are different between if there's a boy or if there's a girl. And that big difference, of course, being Brit Milah, being circumcision. So let's take a look at a few of these elements. Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuven. This is just one example of the dozens of examples of where the giving of a name is given a very clear description in the Torah. Names don't usually, for important people at least, pop out of thin air. Especially in the Torah, the name is usually given with some form of explanation. Names have meaning. Names have significance. Oftentimes, the names will reflect gratitude. People will be thankful to God for this child. They'll be thankful for being in this place, thankful for living to this moment. And in some way, they will take words that express that gratitude and shape them into a name. Names can also reflect our present. So, for example, Ephraim and Menashe, the two sons of Joseph, each reflect him coming to terms with having been estranged from his family, from Jacob and the sons, and now living in the land of Egypt. We also see this in the naming of Moses' son Gershom, that he is a stranger there, that this is his current condition, and he names the child after that feeling. They can also reflect our dreams, and indeed in many of the prophecies and the prophets, they will name their children in certain ways in order to express hope that there will be a reconciliation between the people and God, a redemption of the people. The names are aspirational. They are dreams. And names will always, no matter which way we go, will also reflect our heritage, our roots. Because in a Jewish name, there are 3 different elements. I'm going to carefully step over the cable here to point this out. So this is the basic template of a Jewish name with one misspelling. I'll get to that in a second. So Ploni is the Hebrew equivalent of Mr. So-and-so, Mr. X. So when you see Ploni, it means fill in name here. A Jewish name will have 2 components. It'll have Ploni, the name of the person in question. In my case, Yehoshua Micha, Joshua Micah. That's my name. But my full name has Bar or Ben, depending if you're using Aramaic or Hebrew. Ploni v'Plonit. That should have been Plonit at the end. Then the name of the father and the name of the mother. In that way, our names reflect not only who we are, but where we came from. They have both elements happening at the same time. You don't go around usually calling someone by that full name, but it is built into what the name is. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. Remember, if you got questions as we go, you just throw up a hand or throw a brick and get my attention. For people who are converting, you might be wondering, if you're not on one side of the conversion, but on the other, how do people who convert then get names? It's not as though non-Jewish parents are going around giving out Hebrew names. So how does it work? Well, you get to choose a Hebrew name. And those names can be chosen from the Tanakh. They can be chosen from history. If there was somebody, a stellar character during Jewish history that you really have a strong feeling for. They can be because of a personal connection. I had one student who chose the name, as he converted and he was married to a Jewish woman, her grandfather was an exceptionally moving person and had passed away some time ago, and he chose her grandfather's name to become his new Hebrew name as a way of honoring the memory of that man. You can also choose a name simply because it's similar to your current name. If you have a name that means strength, you might pick a Hebrew name that means strength. Sometimes people will pick names that simply have similar first letters. Sometimes people will have names that sound vaguely like their current name. Or there may be some completely different reason why you pick a particular name for a Hebrew name. There is no rule that a Hebrew name has to be a particular form, except for the parents. Because when you get to the ben or bat, when you get to the parent side, obviously if somebody's converting, their parents are not Jewish, but nobody who converts is left without parents because everybody gets Abraham and Sarah. Everyone gets Abraham and Sarah as their parents. That way you always get the best parents possible and the most original parents, that is to say, in the Jewish family tree possible. So there's no feeling of coming in at the bottom branch, but you're right there at the trunk. I'm looking for any reaction, questions. No, am I explaining things too well tonight? Okay. Oh, was that a question? Oh, that's a good, okay, thumbs up. All right, moving on then. So throughout the generations, every male among you will be circumcised at the age of 8 days. Taken from the book of Genesis, when Abraham gets the notice that he is going to have to circumcise himself and circumcise his son Ishmael, who was already born, and any future children, any future boys, to circumcise them at 8 days. Brit Milah takes place, therefore, on the 8th day from after that birth. And that 8th day is counted, including the day of birth itself, as day 1. So it's not like the day of birth plus 8 days. It's day of birth is 1, next day, day 2, and so on till you get to 8. The Brit Milah will be postponed if the child is unhealthy. For example, was not a terribly healthy baby, and it took about 30 days before I got to come home from the hospital, and that's when my circumcision took place. And that is something that is codified in Jewish law. It's not a question of, maybe we can go ahead and do the circumcision. Maybe if the baby is at all unhealthy, you wait. On the other hand, lest you think that we push off circumcision just because we feel like it, we do not push off circumcision for almost any other reason other than danger for the child. So if the circumcision falls on an inconvenient day of the week, tough. That's the day we're still doing it. If the circumcision falls on a Shabbat or a holiday, that's the day we're doing it, even though we would normally never do a procedure like a circumcision, which involves cutting and wounding in some respect on Shabbat. When it's Brit Milah, the 8th day rule is so strong that we are able to do all that's necessary for the circumcision, even on Shabbat. Good?
Yeah.
Not good.
We have a lot of these at hospitals. Does it have to be, or does it, okay.
Hold on a second. You are 2 pages ahead.
Okay.
All right, so who does the circumcision? We'll come back to.
Hey, does it have to? Because I mean, hospitals.
2 days. Not 2 days. 2 pages. 2 pages. All right, so first of all, what is the circumcision meant to achieve? Well, the circumcision is explained in the Torah itself, that the circumcision is a sign of the covenant between me and you, and that capital me means God, and you, Abraham, or you, the Jewish people. It is not a creation of the covenant, but a sign of the covenant. It is the most personal and powerful physical reminder of that covenant between us and God. It is often pointed out that it is a reminder that the covenant between us and God extends to the most intimate part of our life, as symbolized by what is usually called the most intimate part of our bodies. And the Brit, the covenant has been so strong, and the connection with Brit Milah, of the circumcision of the covenant, so strong, that even under extreme persecution, Jews still found ways to circumcise their boys, oftentimes even if that meant having to either flee the country, do it in secret, or transgress many different laws and edicts of different anti-Semitic kings and regimes. So this has been a big one for 3,000 years, and it's been one of the, not exactly defining, but certainly one of the things that we have held on to most carefully over this entire time period. Okay, so questions about the symbolism of the Brit Milah as being reflecting the covenant. Good. All of this, of course, is very much the top layer. You have many resources that I've recommended before. Observant Life has a great section on this. So does the Jewish Home Advisor. Who does it? Coming back to your question, Moni. All right, so the ceremony of Brit Milah, let's talk about the who first, and then we'll go into the where. The circumcision of Brit Milah technically is a responsibility of the parents. Now, most parents I know don't have the skills to perform the procedure. And even those who have the skills often don't have the tranquility of mind. They're not quite relaxed enough to do the job themselves. And so most will appoint a professional, if you will, to take care of the business of circumcision themselves. The parents will still do the blessing, the parents will still be present, but they'll have someone else handle the physical aspect of the circumcision. And that's perfectly natural. Now, who do you choose to do that? Well, the recommendation that I give to everybody is to use what's known as a moil or mohel, which is somebody that is trained in doing circumcision in the Jewish manner and for the Jewish reasons, and therefore will have done many, many, many circumcisions. Many people in our modern world think they feel more comfortable in a hospital. There are a couple of issues with that. One is that in many cases, the hospital is sending you home long before you hit 8 days, which means the circumcision is not a Brit Milah, it is purely a surgical procedure. And that creates a certain complication. Even if it was happening on the 8 days, or just after the 8 days, if necessary to postpone, I don't want to speak poorly of the many doctors that I've met that are very fine, but most doctors don't do a lot of circumcisions. It's not their main job. Most pediatricians don't do a lot of circumcisions. It's not their main job. They know how. They watched a couple when they were in medical school. They've done a couple with a teacher watching them. And after that, they've just been sort of on their own doing them as they can. A moil, on the other hand, a mohel, is somebody who has studied circumcision as its own topic, not just as a one-day seminar in medical school. And they have studied it intensely, and they have apprenticed for this job very, very carefully. And they have practiced on many different techniques. The rabbi I worked with in Baltimore, who was a trained moil as well, says that when he was learning, he had to make sculptures, and then he had to practice on them so that he would know the physical traits perfectly, so that he knew exactly what he was doing. And it took months and months and months of training to be able to both sculpt and to be able to both cut on all of these practice techniques before anyone let him anywhere near a human being. And that made him and others who have been trained uniquely qualified to do the physical skill. It also means that their training has made them uniquely able to do it with the least amount of discomfort to the child. For those of you who have been around newborn babies, and you don't get much more newborn than 8 days, the thing that makes the infant most upset is not the actual circumcision. The cutting itself is, if the doctor or the mohel, and many mohels are doctors as well, is done carefully and quickly, it is really no problem for the child. There is a small little beep, and that's it. The part that makes the child uncomfortable is being uncovered and being spread out for the procedure. I know even with our daughter, when we were first changing her diaper after bringing her home from the hospital, unrolling those legs, that's when she was unhappy. Most medical facilities, doctors, pediatrician offices, etc., will use a circumstraint. That's the real word. It's a plastic board that they strap the baby to do the procedure. The babies don't like that. They really, really don't like that, having been there for a few of those. And when a mohel does it, instead, they will have a family member hold the child gently until they need to just spread enough, and then the mohel does it very quickly, and then the child is wrapped up after having been cleaned, and it takes a matter of about a minute to do the whole procedure. I have seen medical doctors who were not trained as mohels put the child on the plank and then begin scrubbing up and doing all the washing and doing everything else. And 5 minutes later, they come back to do the procedure. And in the meantime, the baby is just screaming. A mohel knows what he's doing, or she. It can be a woman as well. So highly, highly recommend going with a mohel when doing the circumcision. But if there's no mohel available, if you only have a doctor, you can still have somebody perform the blessings while the doctor does the actual procedure, and it is still a valid Brit Milah. Question? Or comment?
Yeah, I was going to say for Bella, someone came to our home and did it. It was a mohel. And we suffered a lot though.
Oh yeah, well, so I'm talking about minimizing the distress to the child. The parents, on the other hand,
We suffered a lot because it was in our home,
right.
And you're thinking this is not a hospital, and it's not probably as sanitary as a hospital. But we really suffered a
right.
whole lot. I suffered a whole lot, but
yes. So
we trusted him.
So suffering in terms of the feelings that a parent might have about their child going through this process, absolutely, I'm with you. And when my son was circumcised, it is hard because as a parent, you don't want anything to hurt your child. However, this is not taking something away from the child. This is not damaging the child. This is giving them the gift of this symbol of the covenant that they will be able to carry for their whole life. And it's important to remember that. And the way we can minimize our own suffering is by minimizing the distress to the child. If the kid is calm, is happy, isn't crying, isn't upset, it makes it much easier for the parents. And the more the baby cries, the harder it is for the parents. So again, a good mohel will know how to keep the baby calm all the way up until the procedure. And regarding sanitation, most homes, if you're doing it in a clean home,
Mine was clean.
yeah, actually they have fewer germs than you'll find in many hospitals. Right? Many people who go to hospitals, they'll catch infections from the hospital more than they would at home, because there's a lot of sick people in the hospitals. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. So as long as the mohel is properly washing up and gloves and all of that, which every mohel I've ever worked with uses those sanitary precautions, and as long as they use proper cleaning on the child before they start, which every mohel I've ever worked with does, and they use antiseptic wipes, and they wash the child completely and make sure that there's no issue of infection, then you're actually probably better off at home as far as bacteria goes than you are in a hospital. But you're right. Most of us, we don't think of our home like that. But it's one of those things that's true, but not the way we normally think. You have another question, comment?
I think there's specifics to this, if I'm not mistaken. I read an article one time that somebody was circumcised, hospital setting,
Right.
and then went through the conversion,
Mm-hmm.
and then, Mola came, said, oh, and obviously, I don't know how it works, but, oh, you're not correct.
Right.
And so then they had to bring, obviously, a specific oil in, and they had to, as an adult, you're already circumcised, you have to get something like a re-circumcision.
So, well, there's a couple different layers to this.
So what happens
yeah.
if the rabbi goes and does the blessing,
Right.
the physician cuts away, but it might not be right.
Right. So there are occasions where, both with a moil, although it's less likely, but also with a medical doctor, where the circumcision will be, not to be too graphic, will be incomplete. That they will not have removed all of the skin that needs to be removed. And sometimes it's just a matter of, it's a small thing they're working with, that they just missed a piece. And when it was just the baby right then, they didn't really see that they had missed that little piece. And they have to do a touch-up later. They have to just fix that little piece that they missed. So that may have been what you're hearing about, that when the person was an adult, the moil went to do what's known as hatafat dam, which is a ceremony for people who are already circumcised medically, but who wish to become Jewish. Obviously, we can't circumcise you again, because there's nothing to remove. So instead, what's done is there is a small pinprick that's done, which...
Check visually?
Yeah.
So pinprick and visual checker.
Well, the pinprick is in the place that you would see if there was any issues. So it's not a question of inspecting with a magnifying glass, but it's we're going to do, oh, look, that wasn't completed. We're going to have to wait on this, and then take care of that as a finish up. So it may be a little surprising, or maybe you already understand this, but most men actually don't go around comparing with each other. So most guys, yeah. so most guys don't know what the correct final circumcision is supposed to look like. So I'm sure the man that you're describing, he grew up all his life thinking that's what it looked like, that's what it's normal. And then when he was in front of an expert, the expert could tell immediately, oh, not quite. just need to finish this off. And then that's what the procedure would have been.
You as a rabbi, do you know the
I do. I haven't seen that many, but I have studied the section. Yes,
you would know.
I have studied, but I haven't actually. I haven't sat down and gone through a photo album.
Okay.
Well, no, a moil does, right? A moil does. They do have to study exactly what they're supposed to achieve when they're doing the circumcision. But other rabbis and other people, we don't actually have to look through all of that, but we do have to know what the circumcision is supposed to be in the end. Yes. Other?
I just, what happened in Kala's case? We're going through the conversion.
Right.
He's our son. He was circumcised, through this method.
Right.
Is he gonna have to go through this later on in life again?
Right. So usually, and we can talk about this more privately, right? Usually, though, what happens is if a child is born with a family that intends for the child to convert, and they are circumcised with the intention that the circumcision will be for conversion, that they will become Jewish at, next year, 2 years, 10 years later, but that's the plan, then that means the circumcision was done l'shem gerut, for the purpose of conversion. And even if there's a delay, we don't have to do anything after that. On the other hand, if a child was born and there was never a thought about converting, and then later the family says, you know what, we should become Jewish, then yes, the little pinprick is what's needed.
Okay.
So, as in many things in Judaism, the intention of the action makes a big difference. That's one reason why when we're doing mitzvot, we always stop and say a blessing so that we're focused on what it is that we're doing.
So we just basically let you know what
Yep.
our mindset was, what our intention was at the time of.
Exactly. Yes, when he was born, we were hoping we were already planning to convert. We were already studying. Moyle did it. These were our plans, and then yes, then we're good to go. All right. So that covers the boys. Simchat bat for girls. Obviously, perhaps not obviously, because some cultures haven't got the memo, but obviously within Judaism, there is no circumcision of girls. That's something that was ruled out categorically by the Talmud and Mishnah very, very clearly, and there has never been a Jewish community that has ever gone against that. There is no circumcision of women. However, when a girl is born, we still want to celebrate, right? Because a new baby is a new baby, and like I said at the very beginning, we like babies. So there is a ceremony there is something of a ceremony in every community, but because it isn't hinged on a mitzvah, but like circumcision, but is instead built around our joy, you find varieties in different communities. So the Jews of one country are a little different than the Jews of another country on how they welcome the girl. You'll still find common elements, right? They're still going to have the name. There's still going to be words of blessing that are given. They're still going to be talking about the fact that this is a new and wonderful life. And the customs range from inviting the family up to have an aliyah on the bima at the first Torah reading right after the birth, or having an aliyah sometime later in the family's choosing, or having a special ceremony at 30 days in the family's home where they celebrate, but it's always accompanied by a feast. So too the Brit Milah, right? We don't do a Brit Milah without having at least something to eat, because we always put together a seudah, a feast together with these mitzvot, and we do the same for girls as well. But you'll see much more variety in the ceremony for welcoming a girl than you will see for welcoming the boy, just because there isn't that particular mitzvah that we rotate everything around. Good so far? All right. Pidyon haben. What are we talking about? The redemption of the firstborn. There's a number of conditions that need to be met here. If, ready for the ifs? If this is the first child born from that mother, and it's a boy, and if the boy was born through the normal way, not through a C-section, then the child needs to be, in quote, redeemed. What does it mean by that? Well, there's an understanding in the Torah that the firstborn of every womb, to use the Torah's term, belongs to God. And if it's a firstborn cow or a firstborn sheep, then there are special sacrifices that we do. Obviously, we're not going to sacrifice a child. We are prohibited from doing that in the Torah. But instead, we need to redeem. That means we need to make an exchange of something because we're taking the kid back and not giving the child over to God. Make sense? Okay, so there's a ceremony involving a Kohen and the parents of the child and the exchange of a few shekels as a symbolic redemption of the child. But this only happens, like I said, on the 30th day if the child meets all of those conditions. So for example, when our first child was Hannah, I knew that I would never get to do this because the first child born was not a boy. So that this is a mitzvah that I don't get to do. On the other hand, I know many people whose firstborn was a boy, and there was a C-section, and that means they don't get to do this. And then there are others who have firstborn through the normal way, and they, on 30 days, get to do this mitzvah. It doesn't take long, it's very straightforward, and it's a great reminder of the way the Torah has described this, and also the saving of the firstborn during the Exodus from Egypt, when our firstborn were not slain, while the firstborn of the Egyptians were. You have a question?
The stuff that I don't study, right? And some of the other stuff I study, but why is C-section considered a flaw?
It's not a flaw. The phrase that's used in the Torah is the firstborn that opens the womb, is the literal term that's used by the Torah. That opens the womb. That this is like inaugurating. It's like, you know, when, pardon the expression, it's like, you know, when they have a new boat and they break the champagne on the front of it and now the boat's ready for sailing. The first baby to come out is like the bottle of champagne, only maybe a little bigger. And that is what opens the womb and really is a symbol of this new stage in the life of the family. And so that's why it's being looked at as having that special significance. So it's not that there's anything wrong with a C-section. On the contrary, we're very pleased that with a C-section, both baby and mother can usually live, and 100 years ago they wouldn't. So it's nothing negative about a C-section. It's simply that the Torah specifically says opening the womb, and so that's what we use as our criteria.
It isn't the baby opening it.
Well, the baby is opening the womb by leaving.
Right. So
Yeah.
with a C-section, it is not the baby sending out the hormones to the mom. So.
Right. Well, and the baby doesn't open the womb because it doesn't go through the cervix, the particular opening of the womb. It goes through the side, which is important because then everybody gets to live. But it's not the same as opening the opening that already exists in the womb.
I have a question. Is this per individual? Like, say for instance.
Per mother.
Oh.
Per mother.
Per mother.
Right. So if somebody was married and they had a firstborn son and they did pidyon haben for that son, and then maybe the mother died, or maybe there was a divorce and they remarried, and that woman has a firstborn son, through the normal method, they do another pidyon haben. So one father could do lots of them, but if it's one father and one mother, it's only going to have a chance to happen once.
Okay, so say that again.
So
say
it's
I get married. Say I get married.
Right.
Okay, with my first husband.
Right.
I have a daughter.
Right.
But we're not, he's not actively living in Judaism.
Yep. So you decide. So you're not going to do the ceremony.
So we divorce.
Right.
Okay. I get remarried.
Right.
And I have a son.
Yep.
Okay. Does he get redeemed?
No.
Oh.
No. But if you switch the roles, if you have a husband and his first wife is not willing to do the ceremony or whatever, or they have a daughter or whatever, and then they get divorced, and then the second wife, she has a boy first, then yes, there is a redemption there.
So under my husband, then, this boy that I have.
It depends on the mother, not the father.
The firstborn boy to the mother.
To the mother, because it's opening the womb.
But it's the firstborn boy to the mother.
Of the mother.
Okay, so if I like.
So once you have a girl first, then you're out of the running.
Okay. In life.
Forever, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so coming of age. At 13, says the Talmud, the age of mitzvot, or that 13 is the age that we hold children responsible and call them young adults. This is the age that we call them a bar or bat mitzvah. Bar or bat mitzvah means the son or daughter of a commandment, although really the term bar or bat in cases like this means not son of literally or daughter of literally, but means a member or under the category of this. And so when a child becomes 13, they become a bar mitzvah. They are now held responsible for their actions. However, as you'll notice, did I not put this on this one? All right, so why is this time set? At puberty is the time they are held responsible by human courts. That means that, the police and the regular courts, they get to charge you for whatever transgressions you've done. But the heavenly court, that responsibility doesn't begin until 20. So it means that we as humans, if somebody steals, we will hold a 14-year-old accountable for that theft. We won't say, oh, he's just a child. We'll say, no, he's stolen and he needs to be punished for that. But God is not counting that as a sin yet. Why the difference? Short answer, because I'm looking at my clock. The short answer is, as humans, we need to ensure that our society and our community follows certain rules in order to keep the community moving in a good way. And if we wait until 20, we have trouble. On the other hand, God knows better than we do how long it takes for the human mind and the human spirit to really mature to the point that it truly understands and has truly made a choice between good actions and bad actions. And that's considered to happen at the age of 20. So for us, we peg this at puberty for we humans, but God cuts us a little bit more slack because God knows our mortal limits better. Now, puberty literally means puberty. That is to say, it is dependent on each child for when they begin. However, our sages realized that if you had to go around and check each kid to see when the hairs are coming out and such, that doesn't work out so well. So instead they said the vast majority will begin puberty by 13 if they're a boy, and by 12 if they're a girl. So that's the age that we're going to use as our limit for boys and for girls. Make sense? Yes, much better than checking individually. Oops, wait a minute. Hold on, did I? All right, somehow. All right, so I'm not quite sure where one of the pages went that I wrote. Maybe I put it somewhere else. But what does it mean to then be a bar or bat mitzvah? Apart from the responsibility, when I say the word bar or bat mitzvah, most people immediately think of the services that we have in the sanctuary on that occasion. And the services that we have are an opportunity for the young person to act as an adult in a public setting. It doesn't make them a bar or bat mitzvah. Right? You become a bar or bat mitzvah. You become responsible. You become obligated to the mitzvot simply by living long enough. Right? You hit 12, you hit 13, bam, you are responsible. But celebrating your responsibility, showing that you are prepared for your responsibility by coming up to the Torah, by chanting from it, by leading services, by showing your engagement with the community, that is something that we have created as a way of saying, yay, responsibilities. That we are so happy that we have more obligations. I know, it's a uniquely Jewish attitude. Most of the time in like American culture, we celebrate more freedoms. In Judaism, we tend to celebrate more responsibilities. Yay, I'm responsible for a baby now. Yay, I'm responsible for all the commandments now. Or yay, I'm getting married and I have responsibilities for another person now. We celebrate our responsibilities. Because the more responsibilities they have, the more chances we have for growing ourselves and our actions by choosing to live up to those responsibilities. With freedom, if I'm not required to do anything, then how can I ever feel that I'm accomplishing something?
And the less we think about ourselves.
One would hope, or at least think about ourselves as part of something bigger than just me. Okay, so I'm not quite sure where that page disappeared, but that's why we have ceremonies and parties for the bar and bat mitzvah. Good? Good. If you have missed the age of 12 or 13, if you are a full adult now and you become Jewish, or you were raised Jewish, but back then they didn't do that for girls, or back then your family was secular and you didn't have a synagogue to be part of, you can have a ceremony at any age. And you'll hear about adults having a bar or bat mitzvah. It doesn't mean that if you don't have the ceremony that you're not a full Jewish adult. It just means you haven't had a chance to show how happy you are that you have these obligations, that you have these responsibilities, and you haven't had a chance to show that you're ready to live up to them. So it's something to consider. If you would like to at some point, for those of you converting, after you convert, to have a chance to come up, to read from the Torah, to lead parts of the service and celebrate it, that's something that can be arranged. Okay, in 15 minutes, on one foot, weddings. Also, back to Genesis. God says it is not good for man to be alone. What God is talking about here is that we work better when we work together. That there is something that is of unique magic when we have two souls that unite to work as one, to become a couple, to have a family. And this is considered something that is sacred, that is consecrated, that is made holy. Which part are you laughing at? So when you build a home like that, then you begin to realize that it would be impossible to accomplish what you're doing without your other half, without that other side. And the husband and wife are meant to love and to respect each other in this Jewish vision of what marriage is supposed to be. And the ceremony to do it despite everything else in Judaism, the ceremony to get married is actually pretty simple. So let's take it to pieces. The ceremony has two parts. It has the betrothal, which is called erusin, and it has then the section of blessing called nisuin. And together we talk about the entire process, the entire ceremony, as kiddushin, which means sanctification. Now, way back when, 2,000 years ago, erusin, the betrothal, the engagement, if you will, used to take place a year before nisuin, before the final step of the wedding. And that could sometimes cause a lot of problems. The idea originally was that you would make the arrangement, you'd make the betrothal, and then you'd have a year to get ready for being actually married. And then you would finish that off. But we've discovered over the centuries that separating it like that doesn't always work out so well. Right? There could be a war, or there could be a plague, or there could be all sorts of other problems, and then the love that you have and the opportunity to be together that you had has been missed. So now we do the two parts together. Good? Good. So what is erusin? Erusin, after the welcoming of the bride and the groom into the chuppah is the wedding canopy. We'll talk more about that in a minute. There's a cup of wine, so we say the blessing over the wine, and then we say an additional blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, Master of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments. This should all sound very familiar because it's a standard blessing we do for many different types of blessings, and commanded us regarding forbidden unions, and who forbade betrothed women to us, and permitted to us those married to us by chuppah and kiddushin. What are we talking about here? What we are saying is that for everything that God has forbidden, like someone else's wife or your sister, God has made a way for something equally or better to be with you, like the person who's not married. So there is always a way to find the opportunity, even if other things are forbidden. And that notion of there are things that we shouldn't be doing, but I get to do this, thank you, God, because that makes my life much, much better, is sort of at the heart of our celebration of marriage, of this unique chance that God has gifted us to be able to bring two souls together. And then we say, praised are you, O Lord, who sanctifies his people Israel with chuppah and kiddushin, with the wedding canopy and the marriage ceremony. Good? All right. Also during erusin, this betrothal period, the groom will offer a ring to the bride, and then recite the following. This is not done in English, although I usually will give an English translation for the groom to say, just in case, which is, behold, you are consecrated to me by this ring, according to the laws of Moses and Israel. That is the wedding, the marriage vow, if you will, that is used in Judaism. And the bride shows her agreement by accepting the ring. If she says, oh no, then they're not married. But once he has offered it to her, then it goes on to her, then that means that they have become engaged. I know in modern America, we tend to think of engagement as being when you first talk about weddings. That's not an engagement, that's a promise to get engaged, as far as Jewish law is concerned. This is the real engagement, and it lasts only about 5 minutes, because 5 minutes later, we're going to finish the process. So we like short engagements in Judaism. So in most modern ceremonies, the bride will also, of her own free will and under no obligation, because the giving of the rings is not a trade, but the bride will also give for the ritual meeting, will give a ring to the groom as a symbol of her devotion and love of him. Hey, Bernie, do you want to open the library?
Sorry.
No problem, no problem. Okay. In this point in the service, then, there is usually a little bit of a break as everything is done, where the ketubah will be read. We'll talk more about the ketubah in a few minutes as well. How are we doing for this first half? Everybody's got the engagement? Okay. You mean the details of the ring? Oh, okay. We got 10 minutes, we can do it. All right, so because, let's back up. There we are. because this ring is used as a symbol of what the husband is promising to the bride, and because she is using it to decide whether or not she is willing to accept his proposal, she has to be able to judge the ring easily. So according to Jewish law, the ring that is used under the chuppah has to be, worth something, at least a penny, but the ring also can't have any like diamonds or rubies or other things on it, because, I don't know about you, but most of us are not experts in being able to tell exactly how good that is. Right? I couldn't tell a diamond from a piece of glass. Just not my skill. Similarly, a ring for the Jewish wedding ceremony can't be perforated. It can't have like holes cut through it, because that also makes it very hard for the woman to know what she's getting. And since this was something that she had to use to say, okay, this is what he's offering to me, is this going to work out? She has to be able to correctly and easily figure out what's the value of his offer. Now, this may sound very mercantile, this may sound like it's like a business transaction and all of that, and there's a certain element to that. But the underlying theme here is that when you get married, you're supposed to be able to be married to the person clearly and without any blinders, right? You don't want to be mistaken about who you're marrying, right? Do you really know this person? Right? You're not marrying the tuxedo. You're not marrying the fancy wedding dress. You're not marrying the big party and the cake. You're marrying the person inside those things. And do you see them clearly? Have you judged them accurately? If so, then by all means, get married. If not, then you probably shouldn't be standing there, because you're not yet ready. If you're only marrying the flash and the shiny, sparkly things, then you're not really making the right connection. Okay. Nisuin. The focal point of Nisuin is the Sheva Brachot, which literally means the 7 blessings. And I'm going to read from this because it's easier. So there are 7 blessings, again, over a glass of wine. We say, "You are blessed, Lord our God, the sovereign of the world, who created the fruit of the vine," the standard blessing for the wine. "You are blessed, Lord our God, sovereign of the world, who created everything for his glory." Right? And by this, you're going to see what we mean is, "You are blessed, Lord our God, the sovereign of the world, the creator of man." Probably better translated as human, of humanity, because we're not talking about the gender, we're talking about the species. And when we get to that, we're saying that God created everything, and everything, therefore, is telling of God's glory. Hey, we are also saying that the creation of humanity is an incredible gift. Is something that is special and something that didn't have to happen. And so because it did happen, we're saying thank you. And we say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, sovereign of the world, who created humanity in his image, in the pattern of his own likeness, and provided for the perpetuation of his kind. You are blessed, Lord, the creator of human or humanity." Every place it says man here, it's actually saying Adam in the Hebrew, which is really more the first human rather than, again, that first gender. So this, we're reminding ourselves that as we get married, we are looking into a representation of God's own image, not the physicalness, right? Because God doesn't have a body, but the essence of what it is to be human is a reflection of God. The intangibleness, the spirituality of being human is a reflection of God's essence. One of the times when we can feel that most powerfully is when we are seeing two spirits come together, when we see a wedding taking place. And then we get a little bit more poetic. "Let the barren city be jubilantly happy and joyful at her joyous reunion with her children. You are blessed, Lord, who makes Zion rejoice with her children." This is where we remind ourselves that the happiness of a couple getting married is the happiness of the whole community, is the happiness of the whole of Israel, because all of us are blessed and rejoice when any of us reaches this point of happiness. "Let the loving couple be very happy, just as you made your creation happy in the Garden of Eden so long ago. You are blessed, Lord, who makes the bridegroom and the bride happy." In this, you'll notice a slight grammar point that's going to be contrasted in the next one, which is off the page, which is contrasted in the next one, which is that we are making the bride and the bridegroom happy. They each have their own reasons and their own expression of joy for being there at that moment. We'll see the contrast in just a moment. You are blessed, Lord our God, sovereign of the world, who created joy and celebration, bridegroom and bride, rejoicing, jubilation, pleasure and delight, love, brotherhood, peace, friendship. What an amazing list of things that God created, right? Even though we may have had a little touch there of Judaism is about the value of the ring or something like that, yeah. The main point of the marriage and the main point of a wedding is this respect and celebration of the joy that God has allowed us to experience by bringing us to this unique moment. And that is something that we get a little gushy over in Judaism. We are very poetic when it comes to this. We are not just, oh, you get married because it's matchmaking. No, we get married with our heart. And these are the words we have said for doing that for the last 2,000 plus years. May there soon be heard, Lord our God, in the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem, the sound of joy, the sound of celebration, the voice of bridegroom and the voice of bride, the happy shouting of bridegrooms from their weddings, and the young men from their feasts of song. So this is where we say, basically, that as much as we are rejoicing now, we long as even more that there should be the rejoicing of full redemption. That not just that others should also participate, but these symbols are specifically used as poetics taken from the prophets for the return of the exile, for the building up of Israel, and the final redemption during the times of Mashiach, when we will know even greater celebration. And that shows you again how much we appreciate and rejoice at a wedding, that this is considered to be as close as we can feel to how we will feel when the final redemption happens. That's how powerful we feel a wedding should make us, be happy. This is the next best thing for the whole world being redeemed. Because right now, for this couple, at that moment, their world is perfect. And that's what we hope for the whole world at a future time. You are blessed, Lord our God, sovereign of the Lord our God, who makes the bridegroom happy with the bride, or makes the bride and groom happy together, is what is cut off of that page for some strange formatting reason, which is a little different than what we saw in blessing number 6, where in blessing number 6, it is each one is happy individually. Now in blessing number 7, the happiness comes because of them being together. So thanks very much. You can turn on the air conditioner as well in that room. Thanks. Okay, so the ketubah, we got 2 minutes left. The ketubah, according to the Torah law, a woman does not usually inherit from her husband. All right, so if the husband dies, she gets nothing. What would usually happen? Well, if there were children, the children would inherit from the father, and assuming those were her children, they would probably let mom still live there. But if there were no children, she couldn't inherit from him because the major form of wealth and property in the ancient world was land. Land was tied to the tribe, and the tribe allocations were meant to ensure that all the tribes would have a fair amount. And if you allowed that to shift to a person from a different tribe, in this case a woman, then one tribe or another would be growing or shrinking in a way that would be unequal. So because of the unusual land distribution meant to preserve equality among the tribes, there was an inequality when it came to inheritance. Everyone follow that? Okay. So too as well, if a woman got divorced, there was no statement in the Torah that she should be given any sort of settlement or payment. The sages 2,000 plus years ago said, this could be a problem if you're a woman, because as soon as you get married, you are leaving the safety of your family's home that you grew up in, and you are going into your husband's home and into his economic world. And if there's a problem, he dies or he divorces you, you could be without a home. And this is one of the reasons why when you read biblical poetry, one of the most common words that's used for a person that is vulnerable and in need of help is the word widow, because widows were often trapped. They were now away from their family home, and they no longer had a home to be with because their husband has died. And so the rabbi said, we can fix this. Now, we're not going to change the Torah law, but what we can do is before you get married, we can make there be an agreement, a contract, that says the woman has a lien, that she has a claim against the husband's property. That if he dies or if he divorces her, she gets to collect a certain amount that they can negotiate. It's since become sort of set, but back in the early days, it was something that was negotiated between them, and they set certain minimums. And the minimum was enough that a woman would be able to collect and live reasonably well, despite having now had this tragedy of either him dying or of him divorcing her. And the ketubah was considered such a powerful contract that the woman always had first claim on all of his property. So if the guy died and there were like 13 creditors that all showed up to collect from his estate, she got to go to the head of the line in order to be able to collect her portion first. Make sense? Okay, and we still require that a ketubah be used, even though we don't use the precise money for settling divorces in the modern world. We still use a ketubah in order to say that there will be a proper settlement should there be death or divorce that will protect the woman. The chuppah, which also got a little cut off. Wedding canopy. Notice the poles together with the canopy. This is where we hold a Jewish wedding, is underneath the chuppah. And the chuppah is used for a couple different reasons. One, it symbolizes the space of halakha, of creating almost little world of Jewish law under which the wedding ceremony is taking place. It's also very symbolic of the home that is being built by the couple that are standing there. The chuppah is also a reminder, and indeed when you read biblical poetry, this is what the word means, of the room that the bride and groom would go to after the ceremony and be husband and wife for the first time. Everyone's getting my reference, yes? Right, so this was a symbol of that union that would bring them even closer together. We still have that moment, at least, for privacy right after a wedding, where the bride and the groom, before they go to the party, get to be together, at least in a little bit of peace and privacy for at least a few minutes before they have to go greet all their guests. But the chuppah has remained one of the biggest symbols of Jewish wedding and a requirement for Jewish weddings for thousands of years. Okay, and I believe, despite the cutoff there, that brings us to the end of the slides. Questions before I have to run to my other meeting?
Just one.
Yes.
So we're going through the conversion. Will we have to go through this with our couple?
Bing! Yes. So let's imagine that you have two people who are already married according to American civil law or according to some other religious law, and they both decide they want to become Jewish, and they both study and go to the mikveh and the Beit Din and all of the good stuff, and they get converted and they're now Jewish. That's great, but you're not married Jewishly yet. Now, does that mean you have to go out and have a $50,000 wedding? No, it does not. But does it mean that there needs to be a ceremony and there needs to be a ketubah and there needs to be, a chance to say, behold, you are consecrated to me and all? Yes. And I have had the pleasure of doing many of those ceremonies for couples that converted and that now are able to have a Jewish wedding. It is exciting, yes. Any other questions? All right, so we continue next Thursday, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And let me.
This is on YouTube, right? It'll be on YouTube?
Yes, it is.
Luis, he's already told you, right, how the schedule changed.
Yes.